I think everybody has a hero. Maybe a few heroes. I think it's a good thing to have a hero because they inspire you and they make you want to be something beyond what you are right now. And they say, I guess, you should never meet your heroes, but I was the very fortunate nephew of one of Canada's greatest watercolor artists, most accomplished, most decorated. And what did that do for me? Well, that was the uncle for whom, when I was a child, my mom packed me up in the back of the Volkswagen, in the back of the little cubby hole in the back of the Volkswagen. No seat belts, of course, in those days. And her and her two sisters, Linda and Rosalind, we headed out in the Volkswagen out to Rockwood, Ontario. Or maybe it was Mississauga, I can't remember. I was only 6 years old at the time. But it was then, and on that trip, that we went to visit their oldest brother, Jack Reed. And I'd never heard anything of him at that age, 6 years old. What do I know? But I quickly found out that Jack Reed was a painter, an artist. And Jack Reed painted in watercolor, and it was, watercolor to the uninformed maybe sounds like paint by number. Sounds like something that you buy a kit at the art store and you kind of just fill in the blanks, the outlines. But watercolor was my first impression of the world of art. And it was because of the work of Jack Reed. And when we went to his house, he met us at the door and scooped me up and took me into the basement where his great art studio was. He had an oversized drafting table and he put me up on the chair. And he took out some paper and some olive green Winsor Newton paint. I still remember that because I remember seeing those names and they just were etched in my mind from that young age. And Jack quickly sketched out a little tree and painted a little background around it. Showed me how to mix the paint with the water. I just loved it. And he set me up with my own paper and then he said, okay, now you paint your own tree and I'll be back in a little bit. I thought maybe he was giving me this great opportunity to be a painter just like him, and what I didn't realize was really what he was doing was just tying me up for a while so he could go upstairs and visit with his sisters, of course. Jack was a very, very busy artist and had very little time. And so when we got to go out there and see him, which is not very many times over my entire lifetime, but it was always a time slot that you had to plan for. And I now know that my mom and aunts really took advantage of the time with him because it was so precious. But there I was painting my first little tree. I don't think he realized it then, but what that did for me was planted a seed. And that seed would spark my interest for a lifetime in art. And I wanted to be him. So for the first 35 years of my life, I aspired to be just like Jack, paint just like Jack. It was naive, of course. I think my art got to be okay, pretty good maybe, but I never really did that well with it. And well, that's a whole other story for another day, but we all know what happened. There's a transition from the watercolor medium into oil painting, and And that's been my life. But Jack was so much more than a watercolor artist. Jack used to always say that if you want to be a good artist, you have to first learn how to draw. And he was absolutely correct. Of course, I could never take that advice for free. In other words, I could never take it and just do it. I had to learn the hard way. And I made a lot of flubs and ugly paintings and pictures that nobody would want, including me. But there was another thing that Jack was really, really good at. And that was photography. And that's something that very few people realize about Jack Reid. You see, when you are an artist of landscape or florals or whatever it is you do, maybe even portraits, people portraits, pet portraits, whatever, it's important to know how to draw. And that's one of the first skills you need to practice. There's no way getting around it. It's a shortcut you can't take. But it's also good to be a little bit of a photographer. And it doesn't mean you have to be an accomplished photographer. It just means you have to take pictures of things that you like from different angles and in different light and different kinds of weather, so that you can get a real feel for how it is, and you can bring those photographs back to the studio and you can study those photographs, and you can crop those pictures and make prints of smaller sections of those pictures or whatever. And you can use a little cropping tool to lay it on the photograph and see how it would look great as a painting or a number of paintings. Jack was that kind of a photographer. He always had with him, with his paint kit and his sketch pencils and what have you, he always had a great bag of beautiful photography equipment. You don't need expensive photography equipment. You need just really basic, these days digital. Your cell phone would work just fine. Now, in those days, he would have shot film as I do now. And the reason that was so beneficial was because you had to make prints. And when you make prints, then you have something to paint from. More tactile and more of an experience than the digital images that we have that are this small on our phones. With a print, you have something that's this big, or you can make an 8x10 out of it. And you can really study it and work on your paintings for better context. Aside from my exposure to Jack Reid, see what I did there? I was also interested in photography, but that was purely outside of my time with Jack. I knew other photographers and I loved cameras. And I got my first film camera when I was 17 years old, to my mother's chagrin. I can remember the day I brought it home and she was aghast at how much money I spent, money that I just barely had. But I would take film photos for years, and it led to many other film opportunities and weddings that I shot and portraits and all that sort of thing. But I really loved it for the landscapes. And then digital came along and I morphed into digital camera equipment. But in recent years, I've sort of evolved into, or back to, analog and film again, because again, that tactile, feel it in your hands, hold the picture, there's just nothing like it. And when it comes to painting landscapes, as I do for a living, this other thing that I do is photography that helps me to sort of capture the context for the paintings that I do. And today I've got this camera sitting over there somewhere, way over there on a tripod, and I'm out taking some photographs in a little valley close to where I live. the Purple Woods conservation area. They have tap lines for maple syrup. It's great. The school kids come here and bus loads, and families come. And, yeah, I think that's all over for the year now, but it's very quiet, and it's a place where I get to come. You can hear the bell ringing. There's a train rolling up nearby somewhere. But this is all of the essence of being a painter. Drawing, photography, and painting. It's just a beautiful triad. It's a beautiful trio. And when they sing together, they make beautiful music. And so I'm going to show you some of my photographs that I'm taking today. And, well, let's see if you can see where paintings might come from and what compositions might come out of those photographs. And I would really love to hear your thoughts about how you've used things to help you be a better artist. Your sketches, your photographs, whatever it is you do to capture the moment, to remember the videotapes that you take, or if you're from back in the film camera days, movie film, you shot movie films. What are your experiences? Do you have those warm and fuzzy experiences of being out there with an analog camera, or any camera for that matter? Do you sketch before you do your paintings? This life we live as an artist is not an easy life, but boy, I want to tell you, it certainly has its joy. And this is part of it right here, being in the woods, being out here in the quiet with a train somewhere nearby, getting closer. My name is Robert McAfee, and many of you have asked to be for me to make more videos and to show some of my process, and so I'm doing that for you. And photography is part of that process. And so here are some of the photographs that I took today.